Hello everybody and welcome. My name is Christopher Martin and today I'm going to be introducing to you some quick tips on how to draw a floor plan at the property and mostly how to save some time whilst drawing that floor plan. So I know what you're asking, why do I need to draw a floor plan? Now essentially drawing a floor plan sketch is the start to being able to create a market ready floor plan so that you can start marketing the property to potential buyers. This is really important because it allows buyers to see what is at the property, the layout of the property, and how they actually want to live in that property before they even visit it. Another added benefit whilst drawing the floor plan is that you can go around the property and see the best features for the property that will help you when marketing it. As well as that, you can also see the landscape of the property, the layout of the property, and where you can take the best photos to market the property in its best light. So now you may be asking, what do I include on a floor plan sketch? Well, all you need to really include on the sketch is the layout of the property, the basic features like the windows, the doors, the kitchen utilities and bathroom utilities, all of the measurements, and anything that you feel is actually a real selling point of the property. It's very important to include the measurements on the sketch because then that way you know the size of the property. You know if it's a single bedroom or a double bedroom. You know if it's a larger lounge or an extended reception room. This is really important to include because then when the buyer looks at the floor plan, they can actually see whether they're going to use that as a kid's room or it's going to be their master bedroom. It's also important to include the windows and doors in the sketch so that way on the floor plan the buyer can see exactly how you access each room and whether the window is north or south facing. So when you first enter a property, I know it could be quite daunting to know where to start when drawing the floor plan. It's best to have a look around the property first, especially the ground floor, just so that you know where you should start. However, it can sometimes be quite confusing when you're looking at a hallway and you don't actually know if it connects to all the rooms in a certain way. A really good tip to avoid any issues with this is to start with the biggest room first and then make your way around all the other big rooms, and the hallway will essentially draw itself. So if you have a look at this example, a good way to start in this one bedroom property would be to start in the corner, which would be the kitchen. After you draw this room, you can move on over to the reception room, draw the reception room, then you can move on down to the bedroom, draw all the measurements for this room, and then move over to the bathroom. After you've done this, the hallway essentially draws itself. You can now finalize the measurements of the hallway and add it in on your sketch. It's that easy. When you're measuring at the property, make sure you always measure in meters. If you have a look at your graph paper, each big square is 1 meter, each small square is 200 millimeters. This way, when you go around the property and draw every wall, you can sketch it out on the graph paper correctly so that it's to scale. So when you're measuring the property, the main things you need are the width and depth of every single room. However, some rooms are a little bit more complicated. Maybe they have a curve, maybe they have a bay window, or maybe they're an L-shaped. Some rooms could even be diagonal. I'm going to show you some quick tips on how we can get around this and actually get the right measurements on the floor plan so that you have everything you need. If you have a look at this reception room, it has a bay window. So all we need to do is get the width and then the depth, and then gather one extra measurement, which is from the bottom of the room all the way to the largest point of the bay window. This will give you all of the measurements that you need to figure out the size of this room. If there is a bay window on the ground floor and the first floor, it is often the case that they are very similar or exactly the same. This way you can duplicate the bay window on the first floor and just double check the measurements later on. This will save you about 5 minutes at the property. 95% of Edwardian or Victorian properties have the exact same bay window on the ground floor as they do on the first floor. So this way you can save yourself a lot of time whilst at the property. Sometimes when you go into a room, you will see a curved wall. This can actually be quite daunting to measure. So I'm going to give you a quick tip of how you can get the best measurement out of this room easily. If you start by drawing the straight lines and do the width and the depth of the room, all the way to where the wall starts to curve, this gives you a good base to start with. After this, go to the largest area of the curve and measure from there down to where you last measured. This gives you all the measurements that you need, and that way you can represent the curve on your drawing correctly. If you walk into a room and see a diagonal wall, it can sometimes be quite tough to measure. However, with this tip, I'm going to make it nice and easy for you. First of all, measure each wall that is not diagonal. After you get these measurements, you've got the base of the room. Now measure the diagonal wall and connect them up on your sketch. This now gives you everything you need for a room with a diagonal wall. After you have measured and drawn your room onto the sketch, it is important for you to add the additional features. These are things like windows, doors, and fireplaces. If you're in a bathroom or a kitchen, you will have utilities as well. These are all essentials that should also be on the plan. So before you leave the room, here's a good tip to make sure that you've got everything you need. After you measure each wall, it's a good idea to add the features of that wall whilst you're drawing it. In this example, you can see we measure in the reception room the left-hand wall. We then see that there's a fireplace, so we add the fireplace. We then measure the bottom wall and draw it onto the sketch. Then we do the right-hand wall, and on this wall there is a door which enters you into the room. So we add that feature. If you follow these tips, you can be sure that you have included all the features that are necessary for an accurate floor plan. If you enter a property that has restricted head height, it's important to add this to your sketch. Anything that is under 1.5 meters is considered restricted head height. In order to represent this restricted head height on the plan, just use dotted lines in the areas where the height is restricted. If there is cupboards or storage above, you can write eave storage or cupboards, so that way everyone knows why the head height is restricted. This gives us all the information we need for a room with restricted head height. Whenever you're measuring a bedroom, don't forget to include cupboards and wardrobes. These are a really important part of the property and really good for the bedroom. This can make it incredibly hard to make out the measurements of that room if you forget to measure into the wardrobes. When measuring bedrooms, if you measure into the wardrobes and cupboards, you actually find a few extra square meters. This is because it's important to measure the actual size of the room, so you need to measure into these wardrobes and cupboards. This will affect your total square footage after drawing the floor plan. And this is really important because it helps add value to the property. Let me give you this tip about measuring wardrobes. Most wardrobes are actually 600 millimeters deep, so this is only 3 tiny squares on your graph paper. This makes it really easy when you go into a room, you know that you can sketch it straight away. It is always worth double checking these measurements, but after you see a few properties, you'll notice that the standard size is always the same. When you're in the kitchen and you're sketching onto the graph paper, make sure you include the countertops. A lot of countertops are a standard size of 600 millimeters deep. This is 3 squares on your graph paper. If you see that it is bigger than the standard size, then do measure it to make sure you're correct. Most of the time, if it has a hob or a sink, it is going to be 600 millimeters deep. It's only breakfast bars that get a little bit bigger than the standard size. It is important to add these onto the sketch because it's a feature of the kitchen that really helps the buyer know exactly what they can do whilst in the kitchen. Stairs are a really important thing to add at the property, and sometimes it can be quite hard figuring out where these go on the sketch. When you're sketching the stairs onto the graph paper, remember that the standard size for stairs is 800 millimeters deep. This is 4 small squares on your graph paper. Now, most hallways are actually double the size of the stairs, so this makes it really easy to gather the hallway quickly. Here's a checklist of things to remember while sketching the floor plan. Always measure in meters. Your graph paper has this laid out for you already. Each big square is 1 meter. Each small square is 200 millimeters. Draw the big rooms first and the hallways will draw themselves. If both floors have a bay window, then they are usually the same. Just make sure you measure both rooms so that you know they are to scale. If a room has a curved wall, start with the straight walls first and draw the curved wall last. This gives you the base of the room and saves you time. Make sure you include all the important features of the property on the sketch. This includes kitchen and bathroom utilities, as well as windows, doors, and fireplaces. It is really important to include all these features on the sketch as it helps a buyer feel like they are living in the home because they know what they can and can't do in each room. Stairs are usually 800mm deep. This is the standard size for stairs in a property, and it is usually half the size of the hallway. Remember to double check all of your information whilst at the property. If all of your information is correct on the sketch, this is going to save a lot of time later on. Remember, someone is selling this property and someone is potentially buying this property. If any information is inaccurate, it will slow down the process. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. For more information on how to draw floor plans, visit the PropertyBOX website.